back at the desk, and I'm joined here with my colleague, Des Alexander. I want to get into a couple things, but first I wanted to maybe touch on the why. So when we think about small business readiness, there's a lot that comes to mind, but why does it matter? Why does small business readiness matter when we think about disasters and resiliency?
So for us, we believe that small business readiness translates to community resilience. Small businesses tend to be the cornerstones of most communities in our country. They represent places where communities go to gather. They represent family touchstones. These are places where they provide jobs for so many of our members of our communities, to where it's just the economic impact and just the cultural impact that they have in our communities is tremendous. And we've seen over the years with disasters that having a plan before a disaster strikes is the single largest determining factor of whether or not a small business survives that disaster. So for us, it translates into making sure that small businesses can remain resilient and continue offering their services over time. So for us, small business readiness is community resilience.
Got it. Now, you mentioned, of course, the key word being disasters. Thinking about that cycle from a disaster. So disaster happens for a small business, thinking about 72 hours after, 30 days after, 6 months after. Could you kind of walk through what happens in that cycle, following a disaster?
Absolutely. And again, those periods that you mentioned are kind of where we start to see the outsized impacts of having a plan versus not having a plan. So in the first 72 hours, of course, life safety is always the immediate priority. But of course, once businesses check in with themselves, are they able to get in touch with their employees? Is everyone safe? Are their customers able to access their buildings if the buildings themselves have not been damaged? Is there power? Do businesses have their own sort of backup so the data hasn't been lost? Have they been able to see and maintain any of their inventory? Just those first 3 days are very crucial, and having a plan very much protects that. And then when you get into sort of a month out from the disaster, that's kind of where you start to see the impacts of longer term closures, where let's say a business, a facility has been damaged, but again, it's a rented facility. So again, you still have to contend with your leasing contracts. Do you have adequate insurance that's going to be able to cover your losses? In the time of your closure, have you been able to maintain your customer base? And then 6 months out, if any of those things have not come to pass, that's where we really start to see large scale closures. I think the current statistic is about 40% of small businesses do not survive a disaster, and those that do, about 25% close within a year. And so having a plan before something happens so that you can control for supply chain issues, knowing how to get services to your customers, just maintaining your employee base and the safety of your employees, all of that is contingent on making sure you have a disaster plan.
Got it. Great to know. We're going to cover some ground today in this conversation, but I wanted to ask you, so what are you excited about? Thinking about all the topics we'll cover today, what are you excited about?
Well, of course, this topic is going to focus very much on our Readiness for Resiliency program, and we have a lot of phenomenal partners here to talk about that program. We also, as a foundation, we take disaster resilience very seriously. In addition to our R4R program, we also have our Resilience in a Box and Disaster Help Desk program. So those with our partners such as UPS, FedEx, as well as MetLife, Verizon, as well as Fiserv and American Red Cross. We really have a very substantial corporate base of partners, and I'm excited to hear what they have to say about the greatness of this program.
Name of the game is partnerships and collaboration.
Absolutely.
And you teed it up because we'll get into R4R in just a bit, but I wanted to mention for folks that are watching virtually, make sure you use the Slido feature on your screen. We're going to get back to it a little later, but it'll allow you to drop some questions in there, and we'll also be asking throughout our conversation a couple questions for you. And I'll tee up one now before we get to the next part of the conversation, but I want to ask folks, and we'll have it up in your chat now, but does your organization have a disaster plan? And we'll come back to it, and again, drop any questions as we have the conversation, and we'll get a panel later, and we'll get them answered. See you shortly. And we're back at the desk. I'm joined by Julia Chakosky, and I want to get directly into it. And I mentioned before the break that we were going to talk a little bit about R4R, so I want to start there with you. Talk a little bit about your role, and then R4R. What is it?
Okay, well, I'll start with what it is. So R4R is a program that FedEx developed alongside the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation to help small businesses mitigate the potential risks of disasters. So we've already talked about the stats, the number of small businesses who don't walk away from a disaster, the lack of preparedness of many small businesses. So this program is really designed to help small businesses become prepared, and then should they be in an area that has been impacted by a disaster, to be able to get grants to help them recover faster.
Okay. Now, who is it for specifically? So you mentioned small businesses, but if someone's watching now and they're wondering if it's for them, like what should they know?
Well, there is a eligibility list that they can find on the R4R website, but it's for small businesses across the United States. There are revenue thresholds and things like that, but the full list of eligibility criteria is on the website.
Got it. And if a small business wants to participate, can you kind of walk through, what does that look like for a small business?
Sure, absolutely. So I mentioned that many small businesses are not prepared for disasters, but really, I don't like to think about preparedness as a dichotomy. It's not a I'm prepared or I'm not prepared. So there is something that every small business, just like there's something everybody in the United States can do to become better prepared. So we talk about advancing our preparedness. So instead of either or, this program provides a checklist. So that's step one, is you can download this emergency preparedness checklist and go through it as a business. Once you've done that, then you can register for the R4R program. And there's a short registration form, and that puts you into a database that is managed by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation. So that's step two. And then if you're in an area that has been impacted by a disaster, the Chamber will start reaching out to those small businesses who are in their database, who have completed that checklist, and will better assess, has your business been impacted by that disaster? If so, how? And they will start working with eligible businesses to get grant funding out to them.
Got it. That's excellent information. I already know folks are right now going to the site and checking it out, but I want to thank you again for joining us. I appreciate it. I know I'll see you again here shortly.
Yes.
With a couple other guests, but thanks again for doing this.
Of course.
How you doing? And we are back. This time, I'm joined by Kevin Kelly. And before we talked last week, I did not know about this program, but the Ready Rating program from Red Cross. Can you talk a little bit about what that is?
Sure. So Ready Rating is a free, easy-to-use, web-based membership program.
Okay.
And it offers organizations one of two self-assessments to measure their current disaster preparedness. And based on the results, members receive a customized next step report that will enable them to develop a comprehensive business continuity program.
Got it. And I guess, is there anything like folks should know that are interested now, small businesses that will be interested now?
Well, it's free. It is an interactive web-based program. The participants own the reports that they customize. We don't do anything with the reports. In addition, there are links to a resource hub of 70 tools that will help you meet gaps or improve your plan and then track your progress over time.
And that kind of touches on what I was going to ask next. What would, say, a small business get out of it if they wanted to use the program?
Sure. It basically gives you an evidence-based planning tool as well as access to resources, and then you can go in and just keep updating it on the site. And again, it's secure. You own that plan, and then it basically will help you mitigate the risk of disasters in your area.
Got it. Now, I was just talking with Julia about R4R. So could you kind of tell us, does it complement R4R, or how is it different from R4R?
Sure. Well, like the FedEx checklist, that is a criteria for R4R, Ready Rating will give you a much deeper dive. It'll basically, based on that assessment, it gives you the detail, identifies gaps and tools to help you build the plan. But what it does is it does complement it, because the grant will, it helps with the eligibility for a grant should a disaster be declared.
Got it. Okay. Well, I'm glad I know about it now, and I'm glad everyone else knows about it. I appreciate you stopping by. I know I'll see you again, too, in just a bit, so I appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe.
All right. Great job.
Good. Okay.
Well, we're back. Again, we're moving today. I wanted to talk a little bit about Verizon's and a new initiative. So I want to start there. Courtney Schoon, sorry, I have to introduce you to the folks. Can we talk about Verizon's new initiative and maybe what drew you to the initiative?
Sure. So Verizon has a long-standing commitment to supporting small businesses. In 2020, we launched our Small Business Digital Ready program to really support businesses with digital upskilling and thriving in a digital economy. And we set an ambitious goal to reach 1 million businesses by 2030 to thrive in a digital economy. And we're well on our way to that goal. But in today's landscape, we know that for businesses to grow and thrive, they also have to be resilient, and they need the tools to be able to prepare for and recover from critical threats like natural disasters. And at Verizon, we also have a history of running to a crisis and really keeping communities connected when it matters most. And as storms and natural disasters continue to increase in our communities, we recognized the need to evolve our approach to that. And so last year, we launched the Community Disaster Resilience Initiative. And through this initiative, we work in communities across the United States with local trusted partners to really help community members prepare for, recover, and respond with resiliency. And so knowing that small businesses are such a critical part of local communities, supporting R4R was a really natural opportunity for us to bring this work together and combining our efforts to support both small businesses and community resilience. And so in supporting the program, we'll be delivering tools and awareness about the program to the small businesses that are already working with us through our Digital Ready program and the communities where we're working across the U.S.
Got it. Now, I know there's some research coming.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about that, the research, along with, of course, the Chamber Foundation?
Sure. So our first step in working together with the Chamber of Commerce Foundation has been to conduct new research. Research to really understand the perspective from small business owners and what are their views on preparedness and resilience. This week, we're launching the initial findings with a full report to come later this summer. But in these initial results, what we're really seeing is a critical gap between small businesses' optimism and confidence about their ability to withstand disasters and then being able to take those first steps towards preparedness. For example, we heard from the small business owners that we surveyed nationally, 94% said they were confident that their business could recover from a disaster, but only 31% of those actually have a disaster plan and 20% have a budget. So we think there's a massive opportunity here to deliver tools that can take them from awareness to action.
Got it. That's great. We love research around here.
Yeah.
Courtney, I appreciate you taking a little bit of time to talk to me. I want to let folks know, so I want to tease another question for the folks watching virtually. What's your biggest worry about preparing for a disaster? So be sure to put it into the chat in Slido, and we'll be right back.
And thank you for the opportunity to join this very important conversation. At Fiserv, we believe small businesses are one of the greatest drivers of economic job creation and community vitality in America. When small businesses succeed, communities prosper. When they face disruption, the ripple effect are felt everywhere. That is exactly why we are invested in U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation Readiness for Resilience program, the R4R. R4R plays a critical role in helping small businesses prepare before disruptions happen, respond effectively when challenges arise, and recover fast afterwards. When faced with severe economic uncertainty, cyber threats, supply chain disruptions, or
Totally
other
fine.
pressures, small businesses often have fewer resources and less margin for error. Programs like R4R help close the gap by giving owners practical guidance, planning tools, and resources that strengthen long-term resiliency. We provide the U.S. Chambers of Commerce Foundation access to Fiserv Small Business Index when disaster hit local communities. These granular insights on the Main Street economic impact leading up to, during, and after these natural disasters are used to guide targeted response investments and inform philanthropic support that effort that creates the boost in small business recovery. For millions of merchants across the country, we provide real-time data on the impact of natural disasters, and we understand that resiliency is often the difference between surviving and thriving. Investing in R4R is an investment in long-term health for our local businesses, local jobs, and economics. This is Rohan Modi from Fiserv, and thank you for having me here. Have a great day.
And we are back, and I'm joined by the full panel this time. And I want to get into it, so I want to give you guys a scenario and then have you walk us through it. So a bakery in any town, USA, just got hit by flooding for a second time. Could you walk us through, one, how R4R would help, and then also how rating would help also? Des, I'll start with you.
Sure. So the key with R4R is because it's a preparedness program, all businesses must be registered for R4R before the disaster strikes. So this particular business, if they are an R4R registered business, once the disaster has been declared in their area, they would receive messaging about how their business is in a disaster declared area and they qualify for a grant. So they would then be given a link to the application. And then from there, they would fill out information about their business losses, just what any kind of like differences in revenue, just kind of like what issues they faced from the disaster. And then from there, we evaluate that. And then after we determine everything is correct, we provide them with a $5,000 grant. And a lot of our grantees, they've told us over half have used that for paying employee salaries. A lot have used it for advertising services, replacing inventory. So yeah, like in terms of a business like using R4R, it's very key to make sure they're signed up before. But once the disaster happens, we're very quick in making sure that R4R is activated.
Julia, Courtney, following up on R4R, anything to add there?
I think Des covered it really well.
Ready rating, what happens in the process for ready?
Well, ideally, the ready rating assessment is done in advance of the disaster, and then that can be used as a criterion for the application. But following a disaster, you have your plan to basically take steps to get through it and start your recovery, as well as in terms of what you learn, you can now upgrade your plan. You can update your plan for the future, for future disasters.
Mm-hmm. And I would say also like using, as Kevin mentioned, like the FedEx checklist as well as the Digital Ready platform through Verizon, like using those preparedness tools like to build your plan. We have the R4R checklist, but given our partnerships with all of our partners, we always encourage all of our businesses to use as many of like those tools at their disposal to build their plans, so that way that they're able to kind of build preparedness for themselves based upon their risks and their issues that they face within their communities.
And I think Kevin mentioned something that I just wanted to hit on again too, and that is, after the disaster, taking a look at your plan again. What worked well? What didn't work? Where do we need to adapt? Were there any gaps that you didn't think about beforehand? Hopefully, you only go through one disaster in your lifetime, but the one thing that we know is that disasters are increasing in frequency and severity. So the likelihood that you will experience another disaster in your lifetime is probably pretty high.
Mm-hmm. Courtney, anything you want to add?
I would just say also learning from the experiences of other businesses, especially through the R4R program, hearing some of those stories and really learning from their lessons what you can take back to fortify your own business.
That's great. I want to drop in another poll question for our folks watching. So regarding your business, which natural and non-natural hazards worry you the most? And that'll lead me into, I want to, for the panel, kind of point out a couple of numbers. So we had a pre-conference poll for folks. One of the questions we asked was, what percentage of businesses take 6 months or more to recover following a disaster? And we had 34% was that number. And then our second question was, what percentage of small businesses are one disaster away from going out of business? And that number was 27%. Then our third question, of course, was what percentage of small business leaders know their regional hazard risk? And that number was 29%. Any thoughts on those questions as we kind of lead into a little bit of Q&A?
Well, I can jump in here, Joe. This really aligns with the research that we've been conducting with the Chamber. One of the most alarming stats to me was that of the businesses surveyed, only 34% reported knowing the hazards common to their region. And I think that that is such a critical foundation to being able to really fortify your business, to understand what are the common hazards, how do those hazards potentially disrupt your business, and how can you address those gaps and weaknesses? And so I think there's a critical first step that hopefully isn't too time-consuming or costly in knowing your risk.
Got it. I want to get into a quick Q&A while I have it up. One question from the audience, and I believe this is related. We'll go Ready Rating. So I'm looking at you. So is Ready Rating a standalone document that can be used for funding, or are there other filings that need to be done as well after a disaster strikes, and what disasters are covered under such a grant?
So Ready Rating, the next steps document that it provides basically outlines your readiness and what your plan needs. So it's really a plan for you to utilize with your business. I'm not sure, everything around Ready Rating is free, the resources and so on. So I'm not sure, the Ready Rating though is evidence of a planning effort for the grant, for the R4R grant. And I guess it could be used for other grant-seeking purposes, but in and of itself, it doesn't, it's owned by the participant.
Got it. Okay. Well, I have a couple more that I'll have a little bit later for Q&A, so I'll pause it there with the questions, but thank you guys again for your participation. I appreciate it. Maybe we have time for more. Maybe we have time for more. Let me go back to our chat. And I believe this may be related to R4R. How quickly would businesses get the 5K grant?
So on average, since from the start of the program in 2023 to now, we've averaged about 27 days from the time the application launches to when the business receives funding. We are always looking to shorten that time frame, and since we've made a lot of digital improvements on the internal side and we have a lot more partners coming to the fold, we anticipate that timetable moving down significantly. But right now, about the average is a little under a month.
Got it. Okay. Let's go to one more. I've got a comment in the chat. My biggest worry is the time that it may take to recover. Will I lose clients or customers during that downtime and not fully have them return? Any thoughts?
I would say this is part of like building into your plan, like highlighting that as an issue that you foresee before a disaster. You can always build your plan around that. Like, are there specific customers that you know are very much like active with your business? Like, are you able to contact them and like be like, hey, like our services are still being offered? Like, do you have means of getting them supplies or getting them services? Like, can you build like customer communications into your disaster plan so that way those customer bases can be maintained following a disaster?
And I think to build on Des's point, That's a purpose of the checklist, is to go through those scenarios. So if your inventory becomes damaged or is unavailable through your normal supplier, what does your supply chain operations look like to get more product? If your building is damaged, do you have an alternative space that you can utilize even temporarily while it's being rebuilt? I think, one of the stories that we've heard in the past is someone will say like, oh yeah, well, I have a second set of customer files or records. And you ask, well, where is it stored? Oh, it's in the storage room back in the closet. Well, if you have a flood and all of your records get destroyed, housing things off-site would give you that continuity to get back to your customers as quickly as possible. And I think we heard from a session earlier this morning about the fact that most big companies will have an alternative location that could be a stand-up in a time of disaster, so that it may not operate exactly like your normal facility does, but it gets you through that rough period where you're waiting for your business to get back up and online.
Got it. Got a question I want to go to, thinking about community. Kevin, so I'll probably come to you first on this one. How can the Red Cross help my business specifically, not just my employees personally?
Well, I have to go back to Ready Rating. I mean, if this is a tool that you can use, and it actually includes in the planning effort. It does point out helping employees. What is your plan to help your employees to cover payroll, and even potentially take care of things that may prevent them coming back from work, like daycares are closed. There are things that businesses can do. But the other thing is that when we respond in a community, if we're doing sheltering and feeding, we try to procure the food and supplies from local businesses. Okay. So it's in our interest that you get back on your feet, and then we will help you and the economy by trying to procure locally.
Got it. Thinking about logistics. So how do I protect my supply chain and shipping during a disaster?
Well, I can take the shipping question. I think making sure that you've got that you've thought about that in advance. FedEx has a business continuity planning team. We also have service alerts. So if there's any kind of weather-related delay, disaster-related delay, we are sending alerts out to our customers so that they can plan around that. So does that mean that they need to ship in a different venue, a different type of service? Do I need to have it held at a location if my business isn't available? We offer other opportunities, ship centers, where your products can be held if you're shipping them in, if you can't have them shipped to your facility.
Got it. Going back to R4R, so if someone is already hit with a disaster, is it too late then to participate or apply for the program?
Yes, unfortunately, because R4R is geared as a preparedness program, we are not able to onload businesses after the disaster happens. Like, the program is really geared towards incentivizing small businesses to really take the reins of their own preparedness and create their plans before the disaster hits. So again, we strongly encourage any businesses on the line to apply for R4R as soon as possible.
One other question. So what are the most common disasters small businesses should prepare for? Like, I know every region is different, but like what should they know?
I'd say flooding is probably the most common, of any region in the country. And it doesn't even have to be necessarily from a major hurricane. It could just be one day there's a rainstorm that continues for 3 days and just causes a lot of flash flooding and a lot of damages to different facilities around the city. So again, flooding tends to be very frequent, and it also tends to be more innocuous in a lot of ways, because a lot of people don't necessarily, they're looking for the big impact, the big storm, the large scale fire, but don't think about necessarily the flash flood that could particularly hit their business after maybe 3, 4, 5 days of straight rain.
And to build on that, I think to Des's point, it's not always a large-scale catastrophic event that you should be considering. High heat might limit your customer ability to reach your business. So thinking about all of those other more systemic hazards that you want to prepare for.
Got it. And I'm thinking about Verizon with this next question. what kind of communication tools should be in place for employees, like when we think about a disaster?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a good idea to have backup communication, have failover for your internet in case of power loss. So there are a lot of new tools that you can try to implement, and really thinking ahead around making sure your employees know what to adopt and everyone has that plan in place is critical.
Got it. Now, I'll go back to the chat, and I'll open this one up to the panel as well. What is the biggest concern you're seeing from small business owners today? That's a good question.
It's a good question.
Or one of the biggest concerns you guys are seeing.
You know, I could go back to the research. I think in thinking about preparedness, one of the concerns we saw was how costly small business owners thought preparedness would be. And, you know, many of them thought it would cost more than 10% of their annual revenue to invest in preparedness. And naturally, that would be a limiting factor for a small business owner to take steps to preparedness if that is the cost they had to invest. I think the reality is that it doesn't have to be that costly, and that it can be done with affordable, even no-cost resources, and that hurdle, and they can overcome that sort of cost misperception to take those first steps.
And I would just say, you know, as speaking with small business owners all day, every day, it's what my job focuses on. It's the so many hats that the small businesses have to wear, you know, especially if you're a sole proprietor, if you have a small office, you know, 2 to 20 employees, is you have so much on your plate already. Starting a disaster preparedness program or creating a plan can really seem overwhelming. And I think that's the message that all of us would like to get out today, is it does not have to be. So whether you're using the R4R checklist or the Ready Rating program, or Des mentioned several other resources that the Chamber has, getting started on a preparedness journey is the first step. You don't have to have a perfect plan in place, but start creating a plan if you don't have one. And let AI be your friend. You know, it's not always perfect, but there's so many AI tools that can help you start building a checklist or building a program. So use that to your advantage.
Got it.
If I may add, again, Ready Rating is free. It's evidence-based. You get access to more than 70 tools, templates, additional resources that you can utilize to the extent you want to, and it's all free. There are training videos. It should save you a lot of your time, and there's really no cost.
Got it. Now, I know this was touched on a little earlier, but I wanted to come back to it. Thinking about partnerships and collaboration, how important is that in the whole process of preparedness and being responsive?
It's vital. I mean, I don't think this can be done without the support of private, nonprofit, and government sectors all working together to really support small businesses and communities.
I will just say, you know, as the founding sponsor of the R4R program, it is extremely gratifying to me to see new partnerships and new collaborators come on board. American Red Cross and FedEx have been working together for many, many years. Seeing Verizon come on board and believe on the program, it's essential to the growth of these programs and to be able to get the message out to more small businesses. And that's really the goal, is to make sure that as many small businesses that can be prepared are prepared for disasters.
Okay. Des?
I will say for us, like especially our partnerships have been vital as far as like getting the program in front of small businesses, not just our corporate partners that have been essential to getting the program off the ground, but also local chambers of commerce, local nonprofits, people who are very invested in community resilience and who see the value in making sure that their small businesses are prepared for disaster. Like we'd say, like those partnerships and relationships have been essential for us, like building resilience across the country.
Yeah, I would just echo what's been said. And our, you know, one of our main strategies is to mobilize communities, every sector, in strengthening the resilience of the community. You know, there's also elements of individual preparedness, and those are built into Ready Rating as well. So, but we just appreciate the partnership of everyone at this table, and just to amplify these messages.
Now, I wanted to take a quick look at some of the responses we got back from a few of the poll questions. So the first one, and Courtney, I'm thinking about the percentage that you told me a little earlier about folks that think they're prepared. So our first question was, does your business have a disaster plan? And 29% of folks said yes, and 71% said no. Any thoughts on kind of that shift in folks that have a plan versus that don't?
I'd say, oh, go ahead, Courtney.
No, I was just going to say, I think it's consistent, right, with what we're seeing, that, the sort of optimism and confidence of entrepreneurs, and having that plan in place, and also to the point that Julia made earlier, that it might be overwhelming to make a plan. And so how can we really get the message out that taking that first step, making that plan doesn't have to be an overwhelming task?
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a look at the second poll question, which was, what's your biggest worry about preparing for disasters? Our highest percentage was the potential cost, and then second to that was they just don't know where to start. Taking a look at our third poll question, regarding your business, which hazards worry you the most? The biggest worry was both natural and non-natural hazards. Is there, I guess, any kind of indicator from these responses for you guys? Like, is there anything that kind of can be teased out from that response about what folks are worrying about the most?
I'd say the value of not just partnerships like ours, but also the programs that we're promoting is kind of getting the information to small businesses and making it as accessible as possible. If people don't know where to start, then it's incumbent on us to make sure that they have the information and is as accessible as possible. As Julia said, like, you could always use AI to kind of ask those preliminary questions and kind of get some of that information, but as much readily accessible and just easy to access that we can make this prepared information, the better.
And I think if you, if you do take the action, and I hope all of you listening do, to download the checklist, you'll see that some of the beginning activities, they really aren't overwhelming. So one of them is, if you've got several players at your business, is to develop a planning team. That planning team then becomes responsible for thinking through all the different man-made or natural disasters and how your business needs to respond. Everything we talked about earlier. Where am I going to get my inventory? If my business, my main facility is unoperational, how can we continue to get the word out to customers that we're still in business? So everything from that to practicing your plan. So if you have a disaster plan, are you practicing it regularly? Are you dusting it off? Are you looking at it? And then just understanding your available local resources. So do you know the phone number? Do you know your main contacts for your local Red Cross? If your employees' homes have been damaged as well, they're going to want to make sure that their family is taken care of first. And so if you can alleviate that burden from them, then they're able to come to work and to be able to feel like their family is taken care of. When we're not worried about our family, we can put our minds and our hearts back into our work. But if you're not certain that your kids are going to be cared for, or that you don't have adequate food because the grocery stores are closed, like, your first concern is always going to be for your family. Once they're safe, once they're stable, then you can start focus on getting your business back up and operating. So if you have that plan in place, if you work with your employees so that they have their own disaster preparedness plans at home, then you're more likely to get back up and running sooner.
Great. So before we close out, I wanted to do a quick hit on a final thought from each of you. Des, I'll start with you. So thinking about one thing folks can do today, thinking about resilience, thinking about readiness, what's one thing folks can do in your mind?
Sign up for R4R. Yeah.
Kevin?
Based on the research, I would say learn what are your local hazards and the risk. That's the first step, is to understand what is the most likely risk to your business.
Okay, and I'm going to be real here. Most of us have a lot of commitments on our plate. For me, I have 3 kids who are all teens, and we are very busy. If it's not on my calendar, I know it's not getting done. So what I would say, one thing you can do this week is to schedule an hour on your calendar to get started, whether that's downloading the checklist, whether it's looking at the Ready Rating program. Do one thing this week to get started. And then put another hour on your calendar for next week and do one more thing.
Yeah, and I would echo Kevin. I think I'd go back to that, knowing your risk. You know, you can go to your local Office of Emergency Management and look for a hazard map and just really understand what are the hazards that you need to be prepared for and how can you start.
That's great. Thank you all for letting me throw questions at you rapidly. I appreciate the time, appreciate the responses. And for folks that are watching, be sure to use the QR code on your screen. For more information, of course, as we mentioned, go and apply for R4R. Stay in contact with the U.S. Chamber Foundation. There'll be more to come, so we appreciate you joining us, and we appreciate all of our panelists for their insight. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.